Hello and welcome to another edition of Your Money, Your Life, Black Enterprises series on all things financial wellness. And listen, this episode of Your Money, Your Life is being brought to you by Prudential. I'm Alfred Edmond Jr., as you know, Senior VP, Executive Editor-at-Large at Black Enterprise. And today we're talking about a subject that really, in a way, is all about the mission of Black Enterprise since its founding in 1970, which is setting an agenda for multi-generational wealth creation. But what's new now is I think there's an appreciation that this can't be just about a conversation. It has to be about our culture. It has to be integrated into the culture for real behavior change. And I'm always focused on how do you change financial behaviors, not just financial knowledge. Listen, we got the perfect guest to have this conversation on this episode of Your Money, Your Life. Someone I've been trying to get on this show for a minute. He is a legit financial media star. He is the creator of Maconomics on Revolt TV. He is the first Wall Street rapper, former Wall Street professional. He is the one and only Ross Mac. Bruh, finally, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. And listen, it should have never took this long for this to happen. We could have made this happen back at the conference. So
you got that right.
It took this long.
Right. So listen, man, you got a huge following. You got a very engaged following, of which I'm one. But for those in my audience who may be new to Ross Mac and Maconomics, talk about who you are, what Maconomics is, and your story, your journey to becoming and doing what you do today.
Without a doubt. So I pride myself on being a guy who wants to bring Wall Street to Main Street. I grew up on the south side of Chicago, went to Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania, graduated from there, worked on Wall Street. And one of the things I learned were coming from, a very, predominantly, all Black neighborhood on the south side of Chicago. Currently, it's one of the worst from a, violence standpoint. So I hope to find a way to change that. But not only that, right, going to Penn, right, Wharton School, where it was 5% Black, one of the things I realized when it comes to this wealth gap in this country from Blacks and whites and other groups, it boils down to an information gap, but also, and even more importantly, an exposure gap. And one of the things that I learned while being at Wharton was that, wow, there's different levels of what money is. And also there are different conversations that other kids from different cultures are having that kids from the inner cities aren't having, right? They have a different conversations at their dinner table. And I learned this by being 18-year-old kid in econ one-on-one class sitting next to an Asian kid who was literally day trading in the middle of class. Mind you, I'm on a $300 Acer computer that I got from like a scholarship program from the Chicago Urban League. And I'm looking at this guy with charts on his computer. I'm, bro, what are you doing? And at that moment, he told me, and this is in 2008, so very interesting time, right? He's doing this in the middle of the 2008 crisis, et cetera. And he's like, dude, I'm day trading. And at that moment, I said, I want to start investing. And at that moment, right, that's when I originally started investing. So at 18, and that was the one thing I always think about, like, I would have never thought about ever investing in general if I didn't see this. And that's what's the exposure, right? Then I went on, worked on Wall Street for a number of years. And you think about the type of exposure there. I'm on a very highly coveted desk. I'm the first Black person on this desk at the time, right? So one of the things that helped get me through Wall Street was reading the Black Enterprise magazines and seeing, the covers, and I always say, man, I can't wait to get on the cover. And then also seeing certain people in the magazines in real life. And, I was always trying to talk to them and learn a thing. But just being exposed to so many things, you realize that's the greatest teacher, right? They say experience is, right, when you're a kid, your mom tells you don't touch the stove and you touch it. Okay, I experienced it. I'll never touch it again. But exposure is a really big thing because being able to walk down the aisles and see people balancing their 401k plan, you glance over like, oh my God, this guy got a few $1 million in his retirement account. What is this, right? So you start having these different conversations. And one of the things I wanted to do was just find a way to not only democratize access to this information that for the most part has been kept away from our world, right? But also find a way to make it more engaging, interactive, and even more importantly, digestible. So what I wanted to do while making music, while working on Wall Street, one of the things I said was I want to start being a more urban Jim Cramer. I want to have, right, if you watch Jim Cramer and his Fast Money or whatever, he getting calls from a suburban woman. Hey, what do you think of UPS stock or Amazon? Right? I get that, but I want to have a conversation with little man that's from the inner cities, right? I want to have that conversation. And so what I started doing was having some very funny conversations, but I'm gonna make you laugh, and more importantly, actually captivate you and say, wow, I didn't know that. I also didn't know I needed to know that. So I'm trying to educate everybody from learning how to invest from a very elementary standpoint to what is crypto, to how to think about retirement, from Roth IRA accounts to how to improve your credit score, to thinking about real estate. And I try to cover the entire gamut. And one of the things I've always said is like, each one teach one. And one of the things is I wanted to use my platform as a way to entertain as well as educate. So kind of edutainment. And most recently, crazy enough, this has led me to having a top rated Netflix Get Smart with Money, where I'm actually working with an athlete. And it's amazing because I'm helping, it's four families, a documentary, and we're helping them. Four families that have different issues in their life in terms of finances. They're partnering with four financial coaches, and I happen to be working with the young athlete, and I'm helping him change his overall relationship with money and start investing and start spending less and investing more.
Listen to my audience. Everybody I bring on this show, I always urge you to follow them on their platforms. And before the show ends, we will definitely do that here. But I got to tell you, when Ross says it's entertaining, and I just saw one of your IG reels with I think it was your baby daughter in the back seat, and
Yeah.
you're literally, what do you think about this? And she's like, I think we should short it, or whatever it was. And
Yeah.
it was still very entertaining or educational. You were on point with I think you were talking about the what was happening with social media stocks like Meta,
Mhm.
and what you could tell what was going on with Twitter and what that might mean for other stocks. But it was really cool how you're in the front seat of your car and she's in the baby car seat. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
this is what you should do. I mean, it was a really cool, accessible way, again, to not make it this oh, I got to be on the New York Stock Exchange floor to have this conversation. You made it part of just, and of
Every
course it
day, right? And
communicates some of the themes of what we're going to talk about today. To be multi-generational, you can't wait until your kid is like we were. I'm in my 20s before the first time I had a conversation about anybody about investing. It needs to be
exactly.
a from cradle, on conversation. Talk to
Exactly.
me about Maconomics as a philosophy, as an approach. Again, I really did want to have this conversation through the Maconomics lens. One, because those who already follow you get that filter, and those who I think should be paying attention to you will have a better understanding of your approach if they understand the whole concept behind Maconomics.
Yeah. So the entire concept, right, is trying to make, trying to have try to make uncomfortable conversations more comfortable and more easy to understand, right? And the reason I say it is most people shy away from the things that they are, self-conscious about, right? I think the vast majority of people, you think about barbershop talk, right? Barbershop banter. We'll talk about sports. We'll talk about, the opposite sex, but we won't talk about our credit score. We won't talk about our stock portfolio, our crypto portfolio. And what I want to do is normalize that. It is something that we want to start having. I want kids I want kids at the lunchroom table, the same way they arguing about who's better, LeBron James or Kevin Durant or etc. They should be saying what stock is better. Is it Microsoft? Is it Apple? Is it Amazon? Is it Google? Like these conversations is what needs to happen, and that's why I show to the world me talking to my daughter. She's only 2 years old, but the reality is financial literacy is a language, right? And the earlier you learn how to speak it, the higher likelihood you'll become fluent in it. And so, me having these conversations, she understands a little, right? But probably not. The vast majority is going over her head. But the same way, if I had a nanny and she was speaking a different language to my daughter, she's going to grow up being fluent in that language. So, guess what? I'm speaking a language she doesn't know yet, but the more she hears it, she will for sure be fluent in it. And that's the thing I want us to start thinking about, right? Like, we shouldn't be, I shouldn't have known, right? I shouldn't think about what is credit when I'm 22 years old trying to go get credit, right? I should already understand this. My parents should have already been telling me about this, and to a degree, hopefully, and we'll talk about kind of the pathways to getting there. But to a degree, hopefully my parents have done some steps that have already helped establish me building credit at a young age. Right. And I can't wait till we start talking about a lot of the things we need to do. But that's what Maconomics is, right? It's making content, right? Reaching your audience where they are. So I'm whether it's on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, or even Netflix for that matter. Now it's trying to reach your audience where you are.
And I do kind of want to start getting into like you said, what we came here to do, to talk about what we should be doing to set that agenda. One of the things that I'm encouraged with, kind of being an OG in this game. I mean, I've been at Black Enterprise over 35 years. Um, your generation and younger are leaning into this conversation, whether you had the education or you didn't, in a way that's unprecedented among Black people.
Mhm.
Like you said, we've been historically reluctant to talk about money, but we're seeing, in the latest surveys of financial attitudes and behaviors among African Americans, that basically millennials and younger they want to know about investing. They're leaning into wanting that information. It's been a big part of the emergence of, I see, a whole new generation of financial educators and media stars like yourself,
Mhm.
who are getting a response and a following that I would say 2, 3 generations ago there was only a handful or a small percentage of Black people that were leaning into it, and the rest of us were kind of being dragged into it almost by
Mhm.
necessity, or just bypassing it altogether. What do you think may be a little different for your generation and younger, that may have been a turning point in the attitude toward financial education, financial literacy, a commitment to multi-generational wealth creation, interest in it? Do you see some kind of watershed event that kind of changed things for the
Yeah,
better, in my opinion?
I I will honestly, yes, definitely for the better. I will equate it to one thing, right? Technology, technological advances, the ability for the democratization of everything, right? When I started investing in 2008, it cost me $13 from a commission fee in order to buy a stock, and then another $13 in order to sell it. Now you got zero commission fees in order to buy and sell stocks, right? Then we think about the power of YouTube and Google. Those are me going to an Ivy League. That's one thing, but I think the smartest schools in the world is the power to just Google and YouTube things. It's being able to have access to information at our fingertips at all points, and I think our generation are generally at the forefront of all of this in terms of being able to better use social media and now leverage it to convey messages. Because what I look at it is, this is what you just called a social media renaissance, right? This is a Black wealth renaissance, and we're utilizing the technological advances to start bringing this information and foster these type of these conversations amongst our community.
What about the manifestation of making this a cultural conversation? I mean, obviously, we are now, again, especially younger generations of African Americans, are very conscious about the culture, what it is, to what degree it should be kept authentic and pure, and what is good for the culture, what's bad for the culture, what defines the culture. But again, I think this is the first time in my experience, that we even think of this as not just the right thing to do conversationally, but it's part of the new emergence of what the culture is to be a healthy, forward-thinking, conscious Black person in a way that I think is different
Yeah,
than
well,
the past.
without a doubt, one, as you can see, my hoodie, my brand, Black Wealth Matters, I find that to be near and dear. And we've had a lot of a lot of things that have kind of triggered, us wanting to be more conscious about this, right? If you look at kind of post George Floyd, if you really look and say, we're having the same marches that our ancestors were having, right? And one of the things I was doing, and I'm very, intentional with Black Wealth Matters, right? I actually was quoted in Bloomberg as them saying this is effectively the digital civil rights movement. Because if we're having the same if we're having the same fights that our ancestors were, then we got to ask ourselves, doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results is a definition of insanity. So what's different now than in the 60s? Well, now we have more access to information, right? Back in the day, from the beginning of America's onset, right, it was illegal for us to become smart and illegal for us to learn how to read. And now, when you think about the high institutions and we think about how difficult it has been to get wealth in this country from, you know, redlining, from predatory loans, etc. Now it's like, you know what, we need to get wealth in order to truly get true equality in this country, right? It's not a, who did you vote for? Okay, let's hopefully, nah, we need wealth. Wealth equates to power in this country, right? This is a capitalist society. Those without capital don't have power. And so I think we are being a little more intentional, but the stats are still unfortunate, right? They say, and I want to say Black Enterprise is one of the, I want to say I quoted it there, by year 2035. Oh, I'm sorry, by year 2053, the median net worth for blacks is going to be zero. And so we obviously have a long way to go because the stats are still showing we have to overcome a lot. And I think people are more intentional, but we still, once again, it's a lot of information that sometimes can be like drinking through a water hose. So we have to just get it from the correct sources and be more adamant and actually be intentional about getting this true generational wealth. So our kids and their kids are straight for life.
On that point, let's take a pause for the cause. From Prudential. Prudential knows the importance of having a rock in your life. Everyone needs a rock. A rock can help turn the far-fetched into within reach. And when you have one, you can reach your potential, your dreams, and your goals. And when it comes to your financial goals, Prudential is the rock you can rely on. With their knowledgeable financial professionals, Prudential can help you get to new heights. Plan, invest, insure, and retire. Visit Prudential.com. Who is your rock? So we're continuing our conversation with Ross Mack, and where you left off is right where I want to kind of begin for the focusing on the topic of this conversation, setting an agenda for multi-generational wealth creation. And you talked about, this is a multi-generational journey. We're not going to turn this ship around in one generation. You're talking about your children and then their children and their children. So talk to me about some of the things that we have to kind of make part of the agenda, if you will, of conversation in our families and our households, and yes, even with our babies, to start turning the tide that like you said, is going to take some time to turn that tide to avoid this zero net worth outcome in 2053,
Yeah.
which again, it's hard to imagine. 2053 is literally technically right around the corner. I mean, you're talking,
It's not that far
20,
away.
25 years away, so, but talk to me, some of your thoughts about some of the principles, some of the habits, some of the priorities that you stress, even for the audience of Maconomics, if we're really going to be serious about, like you said, harnessing the power of wealth to make other changes,
Yeah.
that we've been struggling for centuries in this country.
First steps first, we have to change our relationship with money. We have to understand that money could be a tool rather than just being a means to an end, right? We have to understand that we are over indexed at spending more than we are investing in and saving, right? If you look at Nielsen, we make up 14% of the US population, around 14%. Yet there are many categories that we are outspending other groups. So, right, realistically, if Black people make up 14% of the population, then when it comes to, certain, clothing and this, that, and the third, then we should be making up 14% of those sales. Instead, we're over indexed in many categories. And it's a long list I have from Nielsen. I'm not going to necessarily get into it, but the first things first, right? Step one, I kind of said step one. So step 1.A, right? We got to learn how to budget better. And I think that's one of the first things because we want to be able to control our inflows and outflows. We want to help. We want to understand that, I want to say roughly 70% of Americans, so not just Black people in general, don't have $1,000 saved. Vast majority are living paycheck to paycheck. And that is a flaw, a fundamental flaw. It's not taught in our schools, right? We don't understand budgeting, right? We taught make money, you can spend money. Oh, and you continue to think you're going to keep making money. You're trained to keep thinking you're going to get this paycheck every 2 weeks or etc. The reality is we want to control our inflows and outflows. We want to be able to build up an emergency fund. which is 3 to 6 months of our necessary expenses in order to survive, right? In the event we lose our job, and you want to be able to have enough money tucked away, right? Another thing I love to say is we have to understand, we have to cope with the reality. The reality is we are all going to pass away at some point. And I think one of the easiest ways of building true wealth in your family is being selfless and actually having life insurance, right? Understand that, a lot of sometimes when we're looking at our community, we are generally kind of in survival mode. It's hard to think, 30, 40 years down the line if you're living paycheck to paycheck. But budgeting is everything, and controlling your expenses so that you have money left over at the end of the paycheck that could go towards investing, can go towards paying life insurance policies, etc. And I think life insurance for a healthy female, right, for just a term life insurance policy, say she's 30 years old or 35, it'd be like $35 to get $1 million life insurance policy, right? And so understanding those little things, so learning how to change our relationship with money, learning how to budget, understanding life insurance is an actual necessity, right? Especially if you have dependents, right? We can make the argument, oh, well, I don't have any dependents, yada, yada. But if you have dependents, understand that you should want to, once you leave this world, you don't want to be passing a hat around in a form of a GoFundMe, but instead leaving your family with true assets, right? And then also we have to understand why it's important to invest. Investing is one of the things that, once again, wasn't taught to us. But, and if you really go back to the time, it's understandable, right? For a long time, Black people have had a mistrust with the financial banking system in this world, right? You can look at the Freeman's Bank, right? Here we go, Freeman's Bank, where they literally were doing, they were doing some fraudulent things, taking the deposits of Black people and going out and making bad investments. And you look up, a vast majority of Black wealth was lost in this, right? And so it's understandable, right? Where Black people's like, you know what? I don't even trust the bank. I'm gonna just put my money in the shoebox, put it under the mattress, and then the people that are okay trusting the banks, then they are saying, well, I ain't gonna invest. I need to see my money. I want to just put my money in my savings account. The reality is, and especially now should really teach you, is that the cost of living goes up every year. And what I'm talking about is something called inflation. So at a very bare minimum, people need to understand that you need to, at a minimum, have your money invested that is something that is going to be equal or more to inflation. So in a normal year, inflation is about 3%. What I mean by that is a basket of goods that you're going to spend in a normal year, next year is going to cost 3% more. So if it cost $100 last year, it's going to cost $103 next year, and keep going each year, right? And so that's in a normal year, 3%. Right now, inflation is around 7.58%, right? And so that means $100 a year ago, right? Or a $100 basket of goods a year ago on average costs $108. And so just think about having your money in that shoebox, right? Where it's getting no return, or even having in that savings account where it's getting pennies, 0.01%, right? 0.06%, right? And so what you need to understand at a bare minimum, a lot of people, Black people will talk about are afraid of investing because one thing they say is, I don't want to lose my money, or two, I need to be able to see my money. Well, first, to the first point of I don't want to lose no money, newsflash, you're losing money by not investing. That's the flat out thing. So $100 today, I'll say this again, $100 today will only be in today's time, right? With 8% inflation, $100 today is only worth $92 next year. That's what that truly means. And so, and in a normal year, $100 a day is really only be worth $97 because it's 3% inflation. But what you need to understand is like, okay, I need to, at a bare minimum, invest. And how are we thinking about investing? So one of the smartest investors of all time is Warren Buffett, right? I'll shout out some Black people too, right? You got the John Rogers, you got the, because we own Black Enterprise, you got the Ross Max of the world. Right? I'll put myself up there, right? But one of the people who I think we could all say is one of the most, successful is Warren Buffett. And he'll tell you at the end of the day, listen, just put your money first things first in the S&P 500. reason that is a great investment, right? When you start thinking about your retirement, and we'll get into all this, right? Portfolios for your kids, custodial accounts. We're going to talk about that too.
Mhm.
But it's like the average return of the S&P 500 is 10% on an annual basis. Average every year, 10%. It's going to go up higher. It's going to go down sometimes. But over the long period of time, over a 30-year period, just say the average return is 10%. Once again, compare that to where inflation is. I mean, your money's going down on average 3%, right? Average, your money's going up 10%. And then you get the ability by investing is the ability of compounded interest, where your money
Yes.
is making money and the money that your money just made is being reinvested. And so I think that one of the things we need to do when we talk about changing our relationship and understand the money that we have is a tool, right? Understanding we're budgeting and we're budgeting to make sure, okay, this is how much money I want to invest monthly. Because it's not about saying I'm gonna put $1,000 in and make and turn that into $1 million. No, the idea is saying I want to be able to invest 200, 300, 400, 500, whatever the number you can afford in a monthly basis. That way, it's you benefit from compounded interest, and that is what helps you build wealth. That is a true blueprint of saying putting $400 in the S&P 500 every month in 25, 30 years, you'll have $1 million. That's an actual fact, right? It's a blueprint
Yes.
of that, right?
Yes.
And so I'll stop
No,
before I keep going.
you're laying it out just the way I need you to for our show and for this audience. And there's the other thing that I think you're hitting a strong point. Too often we think, often because either we haven't been exposed to it or we're going by what we see in popular culture, movies, that being in the markets is about some big hit. Like I got this stock at the right time, I had this big hit. You're making the point that it's not about timing the market; it's about time in the market. It's the
Yes,
S&P 500's performance over time that averages out 10%. So yeah, in a given year, it can drop, and maybe in some other years it might be 12%. But you're not really looking at it from year to year. And this idea that true wealth creation, and this is something that I spend a lot of time trying to again make it part of a cultural understanding, is always a long game. Like no matter how you choose to build wealth, whether you want to do it, primarily with real estate or stocks or and obviously it needs to be a combination of multiple things because you want diversification.
absolutely.
But it's a long game. It's not I got this right stock at this time and now I am rolling in the millions. The other thing I'd like to just spend some more time on is this idea that we don't. First of all, black people in general, especially in my generation, I'm a baby boomer. We actually are not bad at saving. The
Hmm.
challenge is we think it's about saving to spend. I'm saving for Christmas. I'm saving
Yep,
for, school shopping. I'm saving for that vacation. Whereas our counterparts, if you will, the person you sat next to at Wharton Business School comes from a culture of saving to invest. So when black
absolutely.
people say, I don't have money to invest, it's usually because we don't think that we save money so that some of it can be used, obviously, to spend. But really, it's about saving to invest. I'm budgeting a certain amount of my money so that I can, buy pay an insurance for an insurance policy. I can um, put into my 401k. I can buy a mutual fund. I can ultimately get into the stock market. When you talk about some of the messaging that you share on Maconomics and through your other platforms, how was it important for you to communicate this idea that it is a long game and that you budget to invest, not budget to spend?
It's definitely a long game. And I love how you said that, right? We have been programmed to think like, okay, I'm saving for something, right? I can save up for that trip to Jamaica with the girls trip to New Orleans, whatever, right? I can save up for those new Jordans, that new Louis bag. First things first, you want to pay yourself first. We're conditioned to pay our bills. We're conditioned to pay a gas bill, car note, rent, mortgage, etc. Right? The most important thing is paying yourself first. So you want to make that a line item, just how you budget. So when you're budgeting, and that's why, I have a budgeting sheet that you can get at Maconomics.com. And it's so important because you want a line item to say, this is how much I want to have for investing, because that is the most important thing. Paying yourself first before you're paying the creditors, this, that, and the third. You want to pay your future self. And that's why investing is important. You want to be able to retire and not work until your untimely demise. You want to be able to retire and end up and enjoy the rest of your years.
You know, my previous guest on this show, Shawnee Curry, we talked about um, the types of lessons around financial wellness we should be sharing with our children. And again, I noted that you engage your daughter, 2-year-old daughter, even now in these conversations. Like you said, she may not know everything that's being said as a 2-year-old, but like you said, you learn languages beginning practically from birth by hearing what people are talking about around you. Talk to me when we talk about this idea of creating a multi-generational wealth agenda about what we could be doing, kind of piggybacking on the topic of the show, the last episode, to have these conversations with, not only our children, maybe the teenagers in our lives, maybe, people we're mentoring, to again make this part of a regular part of the cultural conversation, not a special conversation. Because I find we tend to wait to have these conversations if we have them ever. Oh, somebody died. Oh, what we're going to do? Or we got to figure out where we're going to get money to send you to college. Okay, now we need to have this conversation, as opposed to it being kind of the ongoing, regular conversation that again is part of our culture.
See, the thing is, and I see it all the time, is we love to give our kids what we didn't have. And what I want people to do and change their mindset is to teach them what we didn't know. So rather than give them what we don't, rather than give your kids what you didn't have, teach them what you didn't know. And so the type of conversations is giving your kids. Not only do we need to, because once again, it's an education gap, it's an exposure gap. We want to educate our kids so they know the stuff that we wish we would have known at their age. So helping them understand what credit is at an early age. Why not? If you, right, assuming, here's the asterisk, assuming you yourself have good credit and you are paying your bills on time and, not overextending yourself from a credit utilization standpoint, right? Put your kids on your credit card as an authorized user. Guess what? My daughter's 2, my son is 8 months. When they become 18, guess what? They'll have 16 and 18 years of bills that have been paid on time on their credit. So guess what? They're not gonna need me to be a co-signer, right, or a guarantor, the word they use. They're not gonna need me to guarantee some loans for them, right? Because they would have already known that, right? Not only that, but let's also start teaching them the power of investing. So instead of when people get together and baby shower this or baby shower is one thing, birthdays, right? I don't my kids don't need this toy that they're gonna stop playing with, or they don't necessarily need these shoes that they're gonna outgrow or these clothes. Get them, make an investment into 2 accounts. You got a custodial account, you got a 529 account. Those are 2 accounts I definitely recommend, right? Custodial account is just a normal stock account that is controlled by the guardian for a minor. Now, the best part about it is they're able to see this stuff. You can get the companies that they look at and know and they use all the time. So what you're doing at an early age, you're teaching them instead of being just consumers, which we all were. Ma, can we stop at McDonald's? We all was consumers. But now you're teaching them how to be an owner as well. Oh, we actually own McDonald's. We own Chipotle. We own Roblox. We own Apple. We own all these things that you use day in and day out. Now, as we're using it, guess what? And your friends using it, technically they are paying you because you are an owner. And so we're teaching them that early on. And then another thing, when I mentioned the 529 account, I know I graduated with student loans. The idea of 529 is to, yeah, I know. And, I graduated student loans and no telling what's going to happen with this bill of if people going to get the $10,000. So they didn't knock that down already. So I don't know what's the come of that. I know one thing, my kids won't have student loans, right? And so that's the idea, the type of head start I want to give my kids. And how am I preparing that? Once again, consistent, putting a couple $100 a month in both of those accounts, right? Everybody might not be able to do $100. It could be $50. But the one thing we understand is that birthdays and Christmases come up every year for these kids. And you don't necessarily need toys and clothes. You can literally say, yo, I got relatives who are now following my lead. Yo, we ain't getting that kid no toy. They got too many clothes. They done already outgrown the stuff I got them last, summer, right? But how could I send money to their 529 account where this is money that's going to literally be invested tax literally you won't get taxed on this money. Tax advantage accounts where it's being invested, and when they get to age, you can literally use this money for higher education, even private school for that matter, and that money will grow tax free. So as long as they're using it for education expenses, whether it's dorms, computers, etc. But the idea is just making sure our kids know the things we wish we would have known, rather than just giving them the Gucci shoes that we didn't have because we was wearing Skechers.
You hit on so many important points that, again, when we talk about multi-generational, we always say if it's not multi-generational, it's not wealth, no matter how much you got. It's not
Yeah.
just what you can earn and accumulate. It's about what you can pass on. And again, I only got hip to all of this stuff. Again, I'm a generation and a half ahead of you because I worked at Black Enterprise. Like that wasn't
Mhm.
something that if I didn't work at Black Enterprise, so my kids did get stock.
Nice.
My son had, I think, the three kids I had at the time. One had Disney, one had McDonald's, and one had, I want to say Nike. I may not be getting right on the Nike one, but
Mhm.
again, it wasn't like they were like billionaires because I brought them this stock. But right away they got it. They were like, "Oh, wait, our own." They were literally paying attention to this. And then you get them to be committed to financial literacy and financial
Yeah,
education because they really did want to know what did my stock do
exactly.
today. And your
And that
other
right
point
there
about
alone is changing their mindset.
absolutely, absolutely. And the other thing is this idea that let's take buying clothes. I tell people, your kids are not going to go unclothed if they don't get clothes for Christmas. That's a
Mhm.
basic necessity that you're going to provide because that's what you do.
Yeah.
But you're not going to buy them stock every day. So yeah, birthdays, Christmas, high school graduation gifts. There's so
Mhm.
many great occasions to really, literally put a piece of wealth, put an asset in your child's hands, or even if it's not a child. I'm like, you could bless, your sister or your cousin or your nephew, even if they're young adults, in a way that will go a lot further than, like you said, buying them a pair of shoes or taking them on a vacation, or even something like a wedding gift. I mean,
Mhm.
I've just seen so many of my white counterparts. The reason they got their house is because their parents paid the down payment on the house, or opened up
Literally.
a fund for them. You know,
And that right there is a cheat code, right? The idea is giving your kids a head start, whether
yes,
it's financially or educationally, right? That's the way, right? Like thinking when I graduated college, I had to go to work because I know I had debt. Their kids, their counterparts that graduated and said, I want to take a gap year and travel the world. I want to see what the world has to offer, really find what I'm passionate about. You don't really find your passion sometimes. We not afford that safety blanket because, unfortunately, we don't necessarily come for wealth. And right, we understand that this a lot of this stuff was intentional, right? We weren't able to inherit a home that's worth $500,000 that our grandparents bought for $40,000. Like we not able to do that.
right.
But right, we can only can control what we can control. And now it's like, okay, let's start trying to get this wealth now.
Yeah, you make a great point as we come to down the home stretch of this conversation. I recommend to my audience on a regular basis, and I'm going to recommend it again because you did mention the Freedmen's Bureau and some other things. See the documentary "Boss: The Black Experience in Business," and what you will realize is that we it's not that we never had the or didn't know how to build wealth. Is that time and time and time again in the Freedmen's Bank is a perfect example. We kind of
Mhm.
got a foothold, and then whether it's redlining, whether it's corruption at the Freedmen's Bank, the wealth building rug got pulled out from under us. And I always say that to people to say this is not something that we are unexperienced generationally to do, but we are in a unique position, to your point, in terms of access to technology, access to information, and at least some of the barriers that our parents and grandparents face
Mhm.
not being there today. That we really owe it to ourselves to lean into this idea of, like you said, not just buying and spending on today, but really putting wealth together that's going to, finance our future, not only our future in our own lives, but the future of future generations, our children and their children. I really like you to kind of tie a bow around this in a way in terms of what drives you, what's made this your passion. you could have had a and still could have any kind of career. You could
Hmm.
be fully focused on just building a career in music. You could still be on Wall Street, a veteran
Hmm.
investment person making great money for yourself and your family. You could there's a based on your own background and your education level and going to Wharton, there's a lot of stuff you could be doing. But what is it that makes Maconomics and what you're doing with Netflix and on Revolt and on and all the other platforms that you're really pushing this agenda? What is it that makes Ross Mac tick and makes this so important? That made you even drop what you were doing and say, "Listen, yeah, I'll come on your show. I'll do that." Tell me about that.
Well, one, I'm always grateful for the people that came before me,
Mhm.
right? And so I told you a story, and this is being honest. I was inspired when you look to the left and to the right of working at Morgan Stanley, and you only seeing one or two black people on the whole floor, right? But my roommate and I, who also worked at Morgan Stanley, we worked on a different floor, but we had the black enterprise. We would be able to see, while there are people that look like us, although it's hard to find them. There are people that look like us, and it's crazy because he still has it to this day. It's the episode with Chris Williams and Reynolds on the cover, and they
Oh
sitting
yeah,
back to back.
Jim Reynolds.
That's just as always. I finally at this past um, Black Enterprise conference, I got to meet Chris, and I told him that story. But those are the things that make me say, okay, what can I do to inspire the next generation? And was really my thing is it's about because it's people who grew up where I grew up who were not as lucky as me. Like I feel as though I worked very hard, but sometimes in this life, it's just being at the right place and right time. And what it was that I was able to sit next to that kid while going to an Ivy League. I was able to walk down that aisle while working at Morgan Stanley. I was able to be hearing people talk about, yo, I got an LLC for this reason and that reason. Oh, I'm writing off this and writing off that. Like it's so many things that I've just been privileged to have and to hear and being in the right room, just like a kid who come from where I come from didn't necessarily he should not have to been in those same rooms for that person to be privileged to hear these type of conversations. So my thing is always just bridging the exposure gap, bridging the information gap. And the thing that gets me going is changing lives, getting constant DMs from people every day from all around the world of saying, man, that video changed my life, or that movie, for instance, changed my life. Thank you so much. And the reality is I believe I'm helping change the world, changing people's financial outcomes one video at a time, right? One piece of content at a time. And I just really find it moving because once again, I'll say it, this is the digital civil rights movement. I feel as though, right, I am doing, similar. I won't say I'm on the same level, but some of our huge civil rights activists, I'm doing it from a financial activist standpoint because once again, I find that we need to have true capital in this country in order for us to get to a level where we can truly realize, hey, this is what we truly are demanding, right? This whole, I don't care if you vote in this or that thing, right? We got to understand that businesses market to us because they know we're overspending, right? Cash advance places, those are put in black and brown neighborhoods because they know we're underbanked traditionally, right? They know they're going to be able to get 300% returns on helping us get the, getting advance or our check that comes Friday and we need it on Wednesday. Like it's so many things that, society has looked at us on a predatory standpoint. And my thing is, I want to help change those conversations. I want to help us know that attaining wealth is very. I won't say it's very easy. Is extremely doable. We just have to have the conversations and actually understand these are the steps we need to get to take to get there.
Listen, Ross, with all due respect to your deference to our civil rights leaders, again, another thing that if you understand our history in this country, uh, it was the wealth creators that financed the civil rights leaders. It was A.G.
Mm,
Gaston and his generation. In
mm,
every generation of civil rights leaders, there was the Earl Graveses, the
yep.
Ed Lewis of Essence. There's A.G. Gaston and John Johnson. I always tell people, who do you think financed that? Who do you think bailed them out of jail when they went to jail? Who do you think
Yeah.
put them up in hotels when they were either couldn't even stay at white hotels or they didn't necessarily have the money to. So what you're doing is part of a great tradition of civil rights. It's just it's different now because you're not just uh, like previous generations of wealth creators financing it from behind the scenes. Now you're teaching others to become wealth creators, and it's one of the reasons that I'm, again, I'm a fan of yours. I'm a big fan of many of the financial, like I said, media stars, educators, evangelists of your generation and younger, because it's a turning point in our time as African Americans in terms of our relationship with money. That's a necessary component, or like you said, if there's a civil rights agenda, I'm just happy to see that wealth creation is on that agenda. But listen, in the time we
Absolutely,
have
man. That
left,
means the world.
obviously we can't cover everything in the world in one show. You as a content creator understand that. But what's the best way for people to continue to access the information that you have, to continue to learn more about you and Maconomics, to get the information, the inspiration to not only learn new things but make behavioral change? What's the way to stay connected with Ross Mack?
Yeah, please follow me on all social platforms at I'm Ross Mack. You could also visit me at Maconomics.com. That's my website. At I'm Ross Mack. Once again, Maconomics.com. You could also shoot me a text message, 773-232-2577. Alfred, thank you so much for having me. It's been an honor. Thank you.
Ross, has definitely been an honor. We got to make it happen again soon,
Without
and
a doubt.
you now know that you're in Chicago, and I come to Chicago a lot. We definitely got to get together and break bread. So I really
My man.
appreciate you, bro.
It's been an honor. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, this has been another great edition of Your Money, Your Life. This episode has been brought to you by Prudential. I'm Alfred Edmond Jr., Senior VP, Executive Editor at Large at Black Enterprise. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time.